The wind smelled of blood, smoke, and loss. Elias Boone stood barefoot in the blackened soil that used to be his land, his broad frame silhouetted against the embers of a dying fire. His wife's grave was a shallow mound beneath a cedar tree, marked with a crooked wooden cross and the scent of scorched lilac. Mary had planted those flowers the spring they were wed. Now they smoldered, like everything else. They came at night, 5 riders, faces covered, hearts colder than the Wyoming. Wind, the Culver gang, murderers, thieves. He wasn't home when they came. He'd been 20 miles east fetching quinine for Mary's fever from Copper Ridge. They must have watched the house for days, waited for him to be gone. They left nothing but ash. Mary never even had a chance to scream, the neighbor said. They shot her where she stood. Then they torched the place and rode off with whatever they could carry. Left behind one message burned into the fence rail with a branding iron. Should have stayed gone, Marshal. Elias stared at those words for hours, until the wind blew cold and the fire died down. He hadn't worn a badge in 5 years. Not since he laid down his star and buried it beside the child they'd lost in Cheyenne. Back then, Mary begged him to choose peace over justice, and he did. Built her a house with his bare hands, learned to plow fields instead of track outlaws, but now there was nothing left to hold him back. He strapped on his Colt 45, wiped the dust from his rifle, and dug the badge out of the box beneath Mary's wedding dress. He didn't polish it, let it stay tarnished, like him. He saddled his black Mustang, Sable, and rode west, not toward the law but toward justice, the kind only found in the eyes of a dying man who knew he deserved it. By sundown the next day, Elias was riding the high trails of Snake Ridge, watching storm clouds roll over the valley below. Thunder cracked across the sky, but beneath it, he heard something else, something faint, frantic, and wrong. A scream. He wheeled Sable toward the sound and galloped down the switchbacks, wind lashing his face like a whip. At the bottom of the ridge, the river had swelled with spring melt, turning from a trickle to a roaring brown fury. And there, caught in the current, was a wagon splintered in 2, and clinging to the rear axle, 2 young women screamed for help. One was maybe 17, the other no older than 14. Their eyes were wild with terror, fingers white on the slick wood. A man's body floated downstream, face down in the torrent. Another woman's arm was tangled in the roots on the far bank, dead. The flood had swallowed them whole. Elias didn't think. He tossed his rifle aside and dove into the current. The water was like ice ripping at his coat, slamming him against stones. He reached the wagon just as the older girl lost her grip. She slipped beneath the surface. Elias caught her arm and yanked, teeth gritted until she coughed back to life. The younger girl cried out as her hand slipped. Elias grabbed her too, his legs kicking against the current, dragging all 3 toward the mud-choked edge. His boots hit bottom and he pulled them onto the bank, choking, shaking, soaked through. The older girl collapsed beside him, sobbing. The younger just stared at the sky, lips trembling, silent as a ghost. Elias looked downriver. The bodies were already gone. He lit a fire with what he had left, gave them his coat, and let them cry until the storm passed. Their names were Rosie and Clara Bennett. Sisters. Their family had been headed west with everything they owned in that wagon. The Culver gang, Elias learned, had ridden through just an hour ahead, ransacked their goods, laughed as they rode off and left them to die in the floodwaters. The same bastards who murdered Mary. Elias stared into the fire that night, jaw clenched, hands shaking, not with fear, but with purpose. Copper Ridge hadn't changed on the outside. Same warped saloon doors creaking in the wind, same leaning chapel steeple catching the morning light. But to Elias Boone, the town felt colder, like the ghosts were no longer buried but walking bold in daylight. He rode in with the Bennett sisters behind him, Rosie on the pack mule, Clara clutching his old duster tight around her thin frame. Folks watched them from behind drawn curtains. Some recognized Elias. Whispers followed him down the street like tumbleweeds in a storm. They reached the sheriff's office just as the bell struck noon. Sheriff Malcolm Dyer sat inside, boots on the desk, face red with whiskey and heat. He barely glanced up. "Marshal Boone, thought you were dead or done." "Was," Elias said. He tossed the burned scrap of fence rail on the desk. "They brought me back." Dyer read the brand and frowned. "Culver boys again?" "They burned my home. Killed Mary." A long pause followed. Dyer scratched his stubbled jaw. "That's bad luck." Elias stared. "Bad luck?" Dyer sighed. "Look, Boone, they run these hills now. Pay well, drink heavy, and they don't start trouble in town. Long as we don't poke the bear, folks stay alive. You come storming in here stirring the pot. Hell, you'll just get more folks killed." Elias leaned forward, voice low. "You already let him kill a preacher's wife and drown 2 girls' parents. How many more?" Dyer didn't answer. Elias turned and walked out. That night, they took a room above the livery. The girls sat near the hearth, wrapped in wool blankets. Clara hadn't said a word since the river. She flinched every time the wind rattled the shutters. Rosie tried to be brave, but Elias could see the cracks. "You ever use a gun?" he asked, setting a small .22 revolver on the table. Rosie hesitated. "Daddy showed me how to shoot varmints, never at a man." "That's good," Elias said. "Means you ain't lost what matters yet." Rosie looked him dead in the eyes. "They killed my folks. That matters too." He nodded, understanding. "The prairie didn't ask if you were ready. It just kept on killing." Clara finally spoke that night, her voice small as smoke. "Why'd you come back for us?" Elias glanced at the badge on the table. "Because someone should have come back for Mary." Over the next few days, Elias hunted the shadows. The Culver gang wasn't hard to follow. Burned barns, robbed, stagecoaches, and stories whispered in fear. One farmer outside Prairie Hollow had found his son strung up by the fence for refusing to give up their mule. Elias promised him justice. The man didn't believe it. Back in Copper Ridge, Elias trained the girls in secret. He built makeshift targets from tin cans and fence posts behind the stable. Rosie was quick, smart, learned to shoot steady with both hands. Clara at first couldn't hold the rifle without shaking, but Elias never yelled. He just guided her gently, wordless, until one day she hit the can dead center and didn't flinch from the sound. "You done good," Elias said. Clara didn't smile, but she loaded another bullet without hesitation. One night, Rosie brought him a torn piece of map and a stolen letter she'd swiped from a saloon drunk. It showed the Culver gang's latest hideout, an abandoned mining town deep in Juniper Gulch, isolated, fortified. "They're holding up there like they're kings," she said. "Even got dynamite from the old shaft tunnels." Elias studied the map under lamplight. "Then we ride tomorrow." Rosie blinked. "We? You think I'm going alone?" Elias said, lifting his duster. "You're part of this now." She swallowed hard, then nodded. "We ain't girls no more, Marshal." "No," he said, fastening his badge. "You're warriors now, and they'll never see you coming." By sunrise, the 3 of them rode out into the dust, into danger, into the jaws of the men who'd tried to destroy everything they loved. But Elias Boone didn't fear death. He'd already buried everything that made life sweet. Now all that remained was justice. Juniper Gulch sat like a scar in the earth, an abandoned mining town strangled by red rock canyons, its buildings half-rotted, its silence unnatural. Buzzards circled overhead. The sun burned low and mean on the horizon. Elias Boone crouched on a bluff overlooking the town, spyglass in hand. Rosie lay beside him, steady as a mountain cat. Clara waited near the ridge with a rifle in her lap, pale but focused. "They're all down there," Elias muttered. 10 maybe. Culver in the old saloon, drinking and laughing like he ain't. Murdered half the county. Rosie spat. Let's stop his laughing. Elias looked at her. You remember the plan? We split, she said. I take the west ridge, Clara covers the north, and when you fire the first shot, hell breaks loose. He gave her a tight nod. You sure you're ready? She looked down at the town, jaw clenched. I was ready when I watched my mama drown. Elias touched the brim of his hat. Then let's go give the devil his dues. Elias rode into Juniper Gulch alone, his horse's hooves kicking dust in the empty street. Guns on his hips, badge pinned cold and dull to his coat. No more hiding, no more mercy. Men poured out of the buildings like rats from a cellar. Faces he recognized, some he'd hunted once, let live. Mistake. One stepped forward, big, ugly, scarred across the cheek. Boone, he sneered. You come to die. No, Elias said. I came to clean house. He drew first, faster than any of them remembered. His colt bucked and barked. Two men dropped before they could blink. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through windows. Shouts echoed off the canyon walls. From the ridge, Clara fired clean and calm. Crack, reload, crack. Rosie came in from the west, knife in one hand, six-shooter in the other, cutting down a man as he ran for cover. Inside the saloon, Zeb Culver shoved open the bat-wing doors, gold teeth gleaming beneath a crooked grin. You always were a damn fool, Boone. And you were always a coward, Elias said. Culver raised his shotgun, fired, missed. Elias dove behind a rain barrel, returned fire, splintered wood and glass in a flash of smoke. More of Culver's men dropped. Rosie put a bullet in one, trying to flank Elias. Clara nailed another through the chest from 200 yards. The sisters moved like ghosts, trained, furious, unforgiving. Elias kicked open the saloon doors. Culver ducked behind the bar. You ain't walking out of here, Marshal. I walked into hell when I lost her, Elias said, stepping through, smoke and broken glass. What makes you think I won't walk through you? Culver popped up and fired. Elias rolled, fired twice. The first shot missed. The second hit Culver in the leg. He screamed, dropped the shotgun, and scrambled for a pistol. Elias walked. Slowly now, cold and steady, each step an echo of vengeance. Culver aimed, hand trembling. Elias didn't flinch. 2 shots rang out. Only one man stayed standing. Zeb Culver hit the floor face first, gold teeth clattering from his mouth. His blood soaked the saloon boards where whiskey had once spilled. Outside, the town fell silent. 10 men rode with Culver that day. None left breathing. Elias stepped out into the street, dusted ash from his coat. Rosie holstered her pistol. Clara emerged from the ridge, eyes wide but dry. She didn't shake. Is it over? Clara asked. Elias looked around at the bodies, the quiet. For now. The wind returned to Juniper Gulch the next morning. It howled low through the canyons, lifting dust from the blood-stained ground and whistling through the broken slats of dead buildings. The battle was over. But the scars would linger. Elias Boone stood outside the saloon, hat in hand, eyes closed, to the rising sun. He wasn't a man to weep, not anymore, but something deep inside him shifted, like the final stone laid on a long-dug grave. He felt the weight of what he'd done, what he'd lost. The law had failed him. The land had taken everything, and yet, somehow, he was still breathing. Rosie. And Clara sat nearby, quiet in the morning light. Rosie had a cut on her cheek and a bloodied sleeve, but her hand was steady as she cleaned her revolver. Clara held a harmonica that had belonged to her father. She hadn't said a word all morning, just stared at it, thumb moving over the worn brass. Elias approached them, slow and deliberate. You both rode harder and shot truer than men twice. Your age, he said. Rosie gave him a tired smile. We learn from the best. He knelt in front of Clara, his voice soft. You all right, little one? She looked up at him. They deserved it, didn't they? Elias held her gaze. Every last one. Clara nodded once. Then she blew a note on the harmonica. It was off-key, wavering, but it was music, and it was hers. They buried the dead under the ridge with no prayers, just silence. Elias didn't mark their graves. Men like that didn't deserve to be remembered. But Mary, she would have wanted peace, even for devils. So he gave them a little of that, dirt, stones, and no revenge beyond the bullet. By mid-afternoon, they rode out of Juniper Gulch, back through the broken passes, across scorched plains and bone-dry creeks. Each mile away from that cursed place felt like shedding a layer of pain. They passed through Copper Ridge 2 days later. People watched. Them this time, but with something new in their eyes, respect, maybe even awe. Sheriff Dyer stood on the boardwalk, face pale beneath his hat. Elias rode up and tossed something at his feet. The badge. Dyer picked it up, stared. "You quittin' again?" "No," Elias said. "Just done pretending the law means a damn thing when men like Culver rule unchecked. Let the town govern itself or don't, makes no difference to me now." Dyer looked at the sisters. "What about them?" "They're under my watch till they decide what to do. But make no mistake, these girls ain't victims, they're survivors." By fall, Elias had settled the girls on a small farm near Red Butte. It wasn't much, just a few acres of untamed land, a mule, and a leaky roof, but it was theirs. Clara took to the soil like she'd been born with dirt under her nails. Rosie started a little trade, selling bullets she cast herself and leather straps she carved with care. Elias stayed close that first winter. Helped build a fence, fix the roof, teach them how to trap and tan and mend wounds. But he didn't speak much. He'd ride into town once a week, trade for sugar and coffee, maybe listen to the preacher read a psalm Mary used to love. Sometimes, when the sky turned gold over the hills, Clara would play her harmonica. Not well, but it made Elias smile. And Rosie would sit on the porch, sharpening her blade, keeping watch. Not out of fear, but because she knew the world now. The real world. One full of men who take, and those who stand against them. Spring came, the land greened. The pain didn't vanish, but it softened. One evening, Elias saddled Sable and stood at the gate. The girls came out to see him off. "You going far?" Rosie asked. Elias shook his head. "Just ridin', maybe head north. There's always trouble somewhere." Rosie nodded. "You'll be back?" "If I don't," he said, "I reckon you'll handle things just fine." Clara stepped forward and hugged him tight. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But that silence said more than any words ever could. Elias Boone rode off beneath a sky painted in fire, a shadow trailing behind him, but his heart a little lighter. He had lost everything. But in saving 2 sisters from a river meant to drown them, he'd found something back.